A plaque at the entrance to Robben Island highlights a quote from its most famous inmate, prisoner 4664. He said, "It is said that no one truly knows a nation until one has been inside its jails. A nation should not be judged by how it treats its highest citizens, but its lowest ones." Nelson Mandela's words ring like a death knell over the state of Israel today. The bodies of 345 Palestinians who disappeared when Israel invaded Gaza 2 years ago have now been returned to Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis. They're so disfigured that only 99 of them have been identified so far. Maha Husseini, who's reported for Middle East Eye from Gaza throughout the war, detailed the anguish identification process undertaken by relatives and forensic doctors who don't have the equipment needed to find out how these victims died. When Mohammed Aish Ramadan identified the remains of his brother Ahmed, who went missing on the first day of the war, he found that the body was burned with 6 or 7 bullet holes and a vertical incision running from his chest downward. One of his brother's toes had also been cut off. Fingers and toes are routinely amputated by Israeli doctors to establish DNA, according to Palestinian doctors. Although they lack the necessary tools to confirm whether any of Ahmed's organs were missing, the marks found on his body strongly suggest that he was used as an organ bank. Other bodies show clear signs of torture. Zainab Ismail Shabbat from Beit Hanun in northern Gaza Strip found that her 34-year-old missing brother Mahmoud had his index finger severed while his hands were tied behind his back, and the marks of metal restraints left dents in his feet. His face appeared to have been so violently struck that his skull was fractured and his neck bore marks of hanging. Estimates vary of the number of Palestinians who have died in Israeli custody over the past 2 years. Data obtained by Physicians for Human Rights Israel from the Israeli Army and Prison Service put the number at 98, but the group said this was probably a significant undercount, with hundreds more detainees from Gaza still missing. Prisoners who have survived detention describe the cruelest forms of torture. According to testimony from detainees received by the Israeli human rights organization Bet Salem, Special Forces stormed a cell in Ketziot prison in November 2023 and beat inmates with batons until they bled from their heads. One detention camp in particular, Sde Timan, has established a reputation for rape, torture and deaths. One former inmate, interviewed by the Palestinian Center for Human Rights, said he'd been raped by an especially trained dog. This is his testimony. "We were stripped completely. Soldiers brought dogs that climbed on us and urinated on me. Then one of the dogs raped me. The dog did it deliberately, knowing exactly what it was doing, and inserted its penis into my anus, while the soldiers kept beating and torturing us and spraying pepper spray in our faces. The dog's assault lasted about 3 minutes. The overall suppression lasted about 3 hours. There are enough contemporary, documented and verified reports about the industrialized abuse of Palestinians in Israeli prisons and detention centers to fill a small library. According to a November report from the United Nations Committee on Torture, Israel has a, quotes, de facto state policy of organized and widespread torture, end quotes, which they describe as including severe beatings, dog attacks, electrocution, waterboarding, use of prolonged stress positions and sexual violence. Israel's own Public Defender's Office, which is part of the Justice Ministry, found extreme overcrowding, hunger, near-daily beatings for Palestinian prisoners, noting that conditions amounted to, quote, "one of the most severe detention crises that the state has known," end quote. Despite this avalanche of evidence, only one Israeli soldier has been prosecuted, receiving a 7-month sentence. 5 other soldiers were charged with aggravated abuse and causing serious bodily harm at Sde Timan after footage was leaked. That leak by an Israeli army lawyer, Yifat Tomer Jerusalemi, caused outrage, but not because of the crimes themselves, but because of the damage done to Israel's army's public image. The lawyer was forced to step down, and the soldiers accused of rape held a news conference demanding compensation for damage to their image. The accused soldiers said outside the High Court, wearing balaclavas, that they were still free and declared, "We will prevail." The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu refused to denounce the assault. Instead, he called the leak the most severe propaganda attack that the State of Israel has experienced since its establishment. Around 1 million Palestinians have been arrested by Israeli forces since 1967, including 17,000 women and girls and 50,000 children, the Commission on Detainees and Ex-Detainees Affairs reported in 2021. That is 1 in 7 of the Palestinian population. Meanwhile, the number of Palestinians in Israeli prisons has been steadily growing. Advocacy groups put the number at 9,250 in November. Of those, more than 3,300 were administrative detainees, held without charge or any form of due process. To call these detainees prisoners is stretching the meaning of the word. They are hostages taken by Israel every night in raids. Itamar Ben-Gvir, the National Security Minister, has made a point of making life hell for Palestinian prisoners. He reduced rations to starvation levels and denounced the High Court ruling against that by questioning whether the judges were really judges of Israel. Gvir is now pushing a bill through the Knesset to impose the death penalty for terrorists acting against the state. This form of words is chosen to exclude Jews, because in his mind, terrorism is only committed by Arabs. Israel abolished the death penalty for murder in 1954, but capital punishment remained on the books for crimes related to the Holocaust and genocide. Israel has executed only one person in its history, Adolf Eichmann, the architect of the Holocaust, in 1962. The death penalty was retained for military courts in the occupied West Bank, but was never used. This was often debated, and the heads of the Shin Bet and the army regularly argued against it. Today, all the brakes are off. The Shin Bet is now led by a religious Zionist, Major General David Zini, who supports the bill. And Ben-Gvir's rise to executive power has transformed the landscape. As it was in South Africa, Israeli prisons also contain the key Palestinian leaders who could negotiate an end to this conflict. There is Mahmoud Barghouti, a senior Fatah leader serving 5 life sentences, who is popular enough to replace Mahmoud Abbas as president. With him is Abdullah Barghouti, a Hamas military leader serving 67 life sentences. An international campaign has been launched to free Barghouti on the same principle that led to Mandela's release, which was a central demand of the anti-apartheid movement. As Mandela himself stated, only free men can negotiate. Prisoners cannot enter into contracts. Mandela's release was regarded at the time as a key step towards peace. He went on to lead negotiations that paved the way for the country's first multiracial democratic elections in 1994, which his African National Congress won in a landslide. Some former Shin Bet heads, now long out of power and with next to no influence, see this. But the direction Israel is taking under Netanyahu and Ben-Gvir is plunging the state into a permanent war with both the Palestinians and its regional neighbours. If the international community wants to stop this conflict now, before it escalates even further, a release of all Palestinian prisoners should become the central demand of a global boycott and divestment campaign. A red ribbon campaign has been launched demanding the release of all Palestinian prisoners in custody. Every political party in Britain should be challenged to support this, not least the Labour Party. The men and women who organise, conduct and rejoice in the daily beatings, rapes, electrocutions, torture and deaths in custody should have the same trial that Eichmann was given, because they are truly his sons and heirs.